Everybody is very welcome. I hope everybody can see me and everything's working clear. If there's any gremlins in the machine, then we'll have to iron them out. My name is James Casey, and you're very, very welcome to this Media and Representation of Disabled People Spectacular. We're here at Independent Living Movement, our disabled persons organization. And a disabled persons organization is an organization run for, by, and with disabled people. We're not a charity and we're not a service provider. We have at our core our values, which seek to have an equal Ireland where all disabled people have choice, freedom, and independence to live the lives that we choose and not chosen for us. And that's where it goes to the core of the disability rights movement, saying nothing about us without us. And that indeed extends to tonight, where we're talking about how we are represented in the Irish and international media and how we want to be represented in those things. So tonight we have a genuinely interesting group of people to talk to, legends in all spheres of the world, and we're truly global. So first of all, thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed. And I'm going to turn it over to our chairperson, Mr. Des Kenny, for a few words. Thanks, Des.
Thanks very much, James. Legends and all of that, and you claiming to be the oldest. I'm afraid you're not, James. Don't get away with that claim. But we have here a lot of very good, young, talented people, including you, those who are aging a bit like myself. James has described what we are, and in a way, what we're confronting tonight and putting before ourselves and mulling over and sharing with people in the media and reminding and reflecting it on ourselves is what confronts all of us within the model of disability. We all, in one way or another, are subject to certain expectations. Expectations of medicine, that we can be cured by our parents, who hope until the very... Can we shut off the chat thing on the thing, Damien? Our parents hope for miracles. I know in my case, I was brought to every well in the county looking for a cure, but that goes then on into the medical intervention and the way that people actually go to control our lives through medication, therapies, and in a way to own us within the medical model. Then as we move and have escaped, as it were, into the social model of disability, probably since the mid-80s, and that I will hear about that later, how we've escaped into that. Our escape there is still in some ways corralled within the context of disability, our charity. We are also having to perform to the expectations of the medical model to some extent, but then the fundraising model expects us to be acquiescent and to accept and to perform tricks, as it were, within a circus to actually bring in the income for charities. And then as we grow older and resist that to some extent, we are represented as oddballs. And in many ways, it's very hard to escape. Can I conclude my remarks, James, by saying that as a young person, I experience in every aspect what we probably will be talking about tonight. And I remember, finding as a blind person going to a special school, we were expected on many occasions to sit in front of visitors and read our books and show how smart we were in adding 1 and 1 to make 3. And in other ways to perform within the thing, blind people. So what I did then, shortly after leaving school, and I put down some notes that I translated and transformed into a poem, which many years later I revised and reformed. It's very short, I'm not too worried. Damien is worried for fear that I was going to start reciting The Wasteland. This is a very short one. It's called Inside Looking Out, and that's what we all are. We're all on the inside looking out of our disability. They came with stare and show of care, those watchers from another zoo. In person heard, their talk observed of the marvelous things they can do. The memory, dexterity, the growing catalogue of recompense in extra sense that brings new talents to their fog. They came to bleed another's need, those leeches with their much to do, while I performed within the norm. they pointed, to clap, to coo. Before my cage of holding rage, their touchwood pity moved to sighs. The visit run and good deeds done, they left and took away their eyes. So James, I can just leave you with that as a sad reflection of a young person growing into an old man who has memories not dissimilar to the memories we will be talking about tonight, but in a way we'll be looking to solutions within the media and within the participative side of co-collaborators with the media to be partners in bringing and sharing the message of what disability is in this 2022. So over to you, James, and the panelists to bring sense to the few words that I've dropped into the well of consideration for us tonight.
Des, that was fantastic. Thanks a million. You know, I'm a sucker for literature, and I really enjoyed that. The delivery was lovely. Hopefully, we can get that put in the e-bonus, because it was really genuinely lovely to hear. And thanks very much, Des. Now we're going to go to, I'm going to come back to Des's points later on to the panel, but now we're going to go, as Des was saying, it leads us nicely into our next segment. It's a bit like Graham Norton, isn't it? I'm not as talented. This is our next segment, which is we're going to hear from a young person and how they feel like they're represented in Irish media. So I'm going to introduce Claire Kenny, and Claire is a young woman from exotic Longford. Jim, if you don't know Longford, it's super exotic. And Claire is going to talk about how she feels like she's been represented, or her in reading of that over the years. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, James. My mother asked a 7-year-old me, "So Claire, what do you want to be when you grow up?" "A librarian," I replied straight away. "But why, Claire? You don't even like reading," she said. "Because, ma'am, I can sit down at a desk and no one will see I am different," I replied. The media has a big part to play in how disabled people are viewed by non-disabled people and how disabled people view themselves. Meaningful representation is everything. If you can see it, you can be it. There needs to be a paradigm shift in how disabled people are viewed in all facets of the media. Language used and narrative is fundamentally important to consider. 2 years ago, I joined ILMI and I learned about the social model of disability. The social model looks at how society is structured and how it disables people. It is not about a person's impairment. It is about the barriers that exist in terms of attitudes, policy development, access, and lack of supports that prevent people from participating in society as equals, with choice and control over our own lives. It is a society that disables people from achieving our hopes and dreams. The crucial part of the social model is that the inequalities that we face, the inequalities are.
Take your time.
Are caused by it is a society that disables people from achieving our hopes and dreams. The crucial part of the social model is that the inequalities are caused by a society that disables people by denying our hopes and dreams, and that is something that can be changed. By embracing the social model, it has allowed me to change how I view my impairment. Viewed my impairment and let go of internalized oppression. A disabled person's impairment, it's just not the issue. Disabled people are more than our impairments. We are intersectional human beings, sisters, daughters, mothers, friends. We are fully rounded individuals with hopes, dreams, aspirations, and laser-focused goals. Disabled people are more than our impairment.
Thanks, Claire.
The betrayal of disabled people needs to change from a sob narrative or aren't you great for going to the shop to the alternative inspirational storyline that is sometimes portrayed to you to show how disabled people overcome their disability, or the teeth cringing they achieve against all odds. One message is particularly damaging for disabled children, as it tells them you have to be cured or overcome your impairment to be a valued member of society. Disabled people need to be seen as equals and as their non-disabled peers on the small screen, as newsreaders, presenters, and on our soaps, in storylines that are not solely based on their impairment. In movies, there should be a move away from the all too familiar.
Claire, we might leave it there if that's all right. Thanks
okay,
a million.
Yeah,
sure. No, it's just thank you so much, Claire. And I tell you what, deadly. Good on you. Claire has been with us since the last couple of years, and Claire is part of our youth collective, and she's an absolute star. So thanks a million, Claire. We're going to keep it to the hour. I'm going to be rambling anyway. That's why it's going slow. Thanks a million. We really appreciate that, guys. Starting from Claire, listen to a young person about their perspective of how disabled people are represented in telly and film and all facets of the Irish media, and how the Irish media represents disabled people. We're now going to go to a panel of, and I'm going to call them legends, and I mean legends as in not a legend that drinks 5 cans of beer and drives the lawnmower through town, but legends as in people who have really made a meaningful and tangible change in how disabled people have been represented over many, many decades. I know some of these people to see, and it's just so surreal to be in the presence of them, and it's fantastic. So I'm going to introduce our panel of James LeBrecht. Jim, everyone will probably know from Crip Camp, the Oscar-nominated film that charts the rise of the disability rights movement in the US. We were lucky enough to have his colleague Judy Human last year. Jim has worked on over 150 films in various roles as a filmmaker. Then we have Mik Scarlet. Mik is an absolute legend. I know Mik from my childhood and Beat That, which changed my whole perspective on my life when I was a kid. I mean, just to see Mik here is awesome. And then we have Selina Bonnie. And Selina has, for over 25 years, been at the forefront of Irish and international disability rights movement. Selina is a proud Indian Irish woman. And I can't think of anyone more who has really influenced my thinking in the last few years about the history that we have in this country, internationally and nationally. And Selina has wrote on disability and sexuality, and she is currently working with South Dublin County Council as the Equality, Inclusion and Access Officer. So I've got 3 questions. I know Jim is rushed for time. So are you okay? Are you cool?
No, I'm good until like an hour from now. Then
I
have to go.
I thought 15:15 because
yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm made a shambles out of it. Shame. Damien is hit the drink now. He's like he's made a show of us. It took about 15 minutes for you to make it.
No.
Okay, well, that's great. That's fantastic, Jim. So this is the first question. So when you guys were growing up, how were disabled people represented in the media? But also, and how did that influence you as young disabled people? How did that influence you to fire that change inside, that motivation? And I finished with Selina. So Selina, is it okay if I start with you with that question?
Sure, why not? Well, actually, it's actually a very interesting question, and certainly got me thinking, and especially as considering who my colleagues on the panel are. I have been a person with impairment since birth. I've been a wheelchair user since I was 10, but I only came out to myself as a disabled person in my early 20s. So my memory of the portrayal of disabled people before I came out is not really there, because it wasn't something I paid attention to. I didn't associate with other disabled people. I wanted nothing to do with any of that, because I was just a person who did things sitting down, but could do anything, just did it sitting down. And I always felt there was always a few strong men around somewhere to get me wherever I wanted to go. But around the time I started to really find myself as a disabled person by my voice, I started questioning and actually considering having friends in the movement. One of my earliest memories is actually Mik. I was a fan of the bill, and he robbed something, was being chased down the street by the police officer. And that's one of my earliest memories of actually going, oh, I'm a disabled person, we're using wheelchairs. And starting to feel, well, gee, just like everyone else, you know, we can be good, we can be bad, we can be funny, we can be boring. And so that was around the time that was one of my earliest memories, other than the kind of, which I consider to be quite positive, because we're not all really nice people. We can all do naughty stuff too. Other than that, it would have been the whole kind of charity model, telethons, all these kind of negative stuff. And it was only really around that time that I started to actually really start to look and question and read and learn. So that would be my early memory, really.
Yeah.
So thanks, Mik.
Yeah, thanks, Mik. Mik, I'm going to make the bill.
It seems to me that you've all, in some way or other, been warped by me being on television when you were young. So,
yeah, I was going to, Selina, you stole that. I remember making the bill. I remember that you played it.
Of course, in the bill, I was playing James Morrison, the record shop owner, and I was trying to stop someone from parking in my orange badge bay. And so I was chasing him up the road when the police chased me up the road. And believe it or not, I still have that on VHS. Most of my career is on VHS somewhere in this house. It's completely and utterly useless unless I can find someone to digitize it for me.
So Mik, what about you? And then we're going to go to Jim. Jim, the bill is a British TV show about
about the police. It's kind of our Law and Order, but nowhere near as glamorous or exciting. As you can tell from the fact that an entire episode was about someone parking in someone else's parking bay. So that was it. There was no murder that week, not at all.
Not yet.
Ironically, I mean, it's funny because I was thinking about this, and as long as I can remember, there's always been disabled people in the media in my life. The first one was Commander Shaw in Stingray, who had an exceptionally brilliant hover wheelchair, right? And I always remember thinking that's what will happen in the future, because I'm the same. I was like born with my impairment. It kind of fluctuated, got a bit worse. About 15, I became a full-time wheelchair user, but I used the chair on and off throughout my childhood. And so I was like, well, that's going to be me at some point. I'll just get a hover chair and I'll be fine. Then the next one I thought of as being disabled was Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man, because that was a man with no legs and one arm and one eye. And yet he had prosthetics. Now they were super prosthetics, but still as a kid, I thought, well, I wore a caliper on my leg. And I thought, well, one day that'll be bionic and I'll be able to run fast. And so then there was Sil in Doctor Who, Nabil Shaban. Then also there was Ironside, who was Inspector. He was important and powerful and had lots of people supporting him. I kind of liked that. Admittedly, I still never worked out how he managed to get up and downstairs, because he was a great big bloke and yet this chair just levitated. That poor assistant of his really earned his money. And then we also had Sandy in Crossroads, didn't we? So there were people. Yeah. And then when I started hitting teenage years, Ian Jury was on top of the pops. So suddenly I was like, well, he had a caliper, I had a caliper. So I was like, well, I mean, he was the one that launched me into the idea that I can be a musician, and that there was nothing, if he could do it, I could do it, kind of thing. And I think one of the things I think that's funny about the media is it really does allow itself to forget its own history. Because if it remembered its own history, it'd realize it hasn't really done very much. So it kind of goes, oh, look, it's a first. And it's not. So, I got told I was a lot of firsts when I started working in the media. And I've since found that that's not true. But, some of them, yeah, but most of them someone else had done before me. And I think that kind of like hearing you speak proves the point. You need to see yourself to feel that you can do stuff. I'm just lucky that I was very good at Lego, I was very good at Meccano, and I had a lot of Action Men that were broken. So basically I used to build my own toys. I've got my own, like Barbie wheelchair user now, and I had a wheelchair user toy for years because I made it myself. So kind of I always sort of saw these people as being the future that I could achieve, whether it be, running on bionic legs, or, working as a policeman, or, hover chairs, or whatever, or even being an evil baddie on Doctor Who, which of course has always been my ultimate dream.
Thanks a million, Mick. Yeah, the Barbie wheelchair, my niece got one for Christmas, and it's got a lift inside in the house. It's fantastic. So the wheelchair is the Barbie house is more accessible than my own house.
I'm actually about to buy a load of punk clothes for my Barbie. That's why I've not taken it out yet. With my Ken doll, I'm going to take my Ken out, and then I'm going to punk it up and make it look like me. So I've got my own doll, and it'll be the Mik doll.
That would be cool.
I'm going to repackage it, cover the Ken up, and put Mik on it, and then I'm going to seal it back up and make it look like it's real.
That's going to be on the shelves at Christmas. That's fantastic. I love it.
I've got a descendant's wheelchair. The mayor man came in a wheelchair. I've got his wheelchair behind me, but I put Upsy Daisy in him.
Oh, that's fantastic. I see it now, Selina. That's fantastic. Awesome. Oh, brilliant. Jim, what do you, the same question to you, Jim. I mean, how were disabled people represented when you were a kid, and how did that inspire you to do something different?
Well, believe it or not, I'm 65 years old. And, well, I say that because I think I look younger than but it's probably only because I joke that my sister got the legs, but I got the hair. So, anyway, it's interesting to kind of hear a little bit of the overlap. For me, growing up, it was telethons and Ironsides, and which took place in San Francisco, right close to where I live in Oakland. And there was also another show called Longstreet, where there was a guy who was blind, who was an insurance investigator, and why that was such a compelling storyline is beyond me. But so there were a couple of these things here, and we really didn't see much. Jerry Jewell, who has cerebral palsy, was in, this is going to kill me, maybe Saved by the Bell, or anyway, we started seeing people showing up here and there. But it really has only been the last few years, I would say, with American shows like Speechless, and more recently, Special on Netflix, and a number of other shows that we're really kind of seeing the kind of representation that is so important. And I loved what Claire was saying. And in fact, I wrote down, if you can see it, you can be it. And I'm going to steal that, Claire, because I really, I've been advocating for this kind of, it used to be with any marginalized community that if we saw them on television, it was because of that community that they were part of, not because they were part of general society. And we've seen this progress with other groups. And we, and everybody, you folks in Ireland and England and such, are way ahead of the United States on all of this. But this is what we're starting to finally see, which is that I shouldn't be in a story just because it's going to be about me trying to overcome my disability or a tragedy or anything.
It's funny though, isn't it, Jim? Because in the UK, we think you're ahead of us because you had ER. Someone was disabled in it, never talked about it. Then you had CSI, again, someone disabled in it, didn't talk about it. So kind of I know from talking to Liz Carr when, she got into Silent Witness, she was saying it was really great to emulate those shows that we looked up to. And then you're over in America going, God, it's terrible here, isn't it? Where we need to be more like England and Ireland and other countries. And it's like, I think everywhere you go, you always think that everyone else is doing it better and have got it better. And I know from my experience that lots of people in the media were always saying we need to be more like America. So that's ironic that you're over there going, we need to be
that's
more
pretty
like
funny, isn't it? That's very funny.
I think that leads us nice into our second question. I'm going to actually start with you, Jim, and go to Selina and to Mik, and that actually is the next question, which I you're doing my job for me. What, if anything, has changed in terms of the representation of disabled people by and in the media? Because, you know, the media, I think people convolute media and culture, and the media is the apparatus of giving us information. It's the whole structures that are there. And culture is a separate thing, opposites to that. I think it's interesting, though, one point that you guys are saying. I was thinking about this for the last few years. I have to tell you, we're all Anglophone countries. We share such a huge cultural history and such a huge history. You know, I mean, I know about Ironside, I know about Doritos and Twinkies, and I know about, you know, like Mik, I know about the Tube, and I know about gyros, and Selina knows about these things, and you know about like Father Ted. But socially, we're very different countries. Ireland is a very different country to Canada, and Canada is a very different country to Australia, and Britain's a very different country to the US. So we have different representations that may be because of the social structures that are there in the past. Whereas if we look at different European films, a lot of time, and you know, the subtext is the same. You know, disability is bad, better be dead than disabled. You know, but there's a much deeper concentration of characterizations, much more complex. There's layers to it, like in the Sea Inside or the Diving Bell and the Bushfly, or whatever. So I think that might be a thing, but I'm rambling there. And the question I was meant to say, but I haven't said, is what do you think has changed, Jim, by our representation in the media? Or has anything changed? Are we falling back on old brush types?
No, I think things are really improving. I think that there's been a very strong push for the last couple of years for authentic casting. That I think we finally got the message to Hollywood that you cannot put a non-disabled person in a role of somebody with a disability, that it is offensive, and it's also just on a very practical level, you're stealing work from someone who does acting as their profession. You know, someone said in a meeting I was in, they're stealing our stories. And I think that you know, that's really true. I helped co-found an organization called Forward Doc, which is a group of filmmakers with disabilities working in documentary. And we've really been able to really advocate a great deal for really getting to the media makers to see, you know, here's how you can engage with audiences. This is how, you know, all the positive things. And there's another group run by some really great people in Hollywood called 1 in 4 Coalition, and it's the numbers 1in4coalition.org, and these are professionals working in Hollywood, and we've been able to really talk to studios and to talent agencies and other groups to say, look, this is what you need to be doing and that you're not doing. And I think we're really seeing the fruits of those labors finally. In better representation, and not to pat ourselves on our back, but it looked like Crip Camp really opened up the minds of a lot of people.
Yeah.
That there are more than stories that are simply tragedy or overcoming your disability. And that, in fact, there's an audience for really authentic stories from our community. So I'm really hoping that we're going to see, you know, the effects of that. You know, the pipeline takes a long time to move, but I'm, you know, very excited. I'll stop rambling 1 second. Originally, we kind of had a tagline for Crip Camp, which was not overcoming, becoming. And I think that is really kind of the message. So
Jim,
I'll leave it at that.
That was fantastic. Let me tell you, it did have it shift. We watched Crip Camp May or June of the 2020 when everything was gone to shit. But we watched it. There was a group of us that came together, and it just exactly like that. Within that space of talking about it, we heard the stories from our own activists, and we recorded those stories from the activists over the years and learned from them. But we seen that there was such a history of disability rights, a rich history, rich, exciting, vibrant, with villains and heroes and anti-heroes. The media sometimes is missing a trick. You know, they're so focused on certain stories are inspirational, they're missing a trick, but it has had such effect, and it's such a powerful documentary. Selina, what do you think? I mean, you know the Irish media.
Well, first of all, I think we need to think about representation as being two separate entities. One is representation as in us being the people there and being the ones presenting and acting, and that very personal active representation. But the other side, which is I think possibly even more damaging and still damaging and is age old, like Barnes wrote about it back in 92, Hunt wrote back about it in 1966, is this issue of kind of language and representing disabled people as these different within these different stereotypes. Whether they're evil or, kind of weak or pathetic or, deviant, whatever. And that, I think, is still a bigger piece of work and that we still need to do, because you only have to look at any kind of tabloid headline or even do RTE only twice recently referring to very strong disabled people as wheelchair bound. This is in 2022. So that side of the representation, we've got a lot more work still to do. Perhaps if we become the ones writing the narrative, that will certainly help. But people, the likes of the BAI and everyone being here is a huge step forward, because they need to learn and listen and think about the language and imagery that they use. I see, even as a public servant, I see, we try so hard with the images we use in the different plans and strategies that we produce to have really inclusive images. You have different ages, different ethnicities. And I go, well, where's the disabled people? And it's like, oh. So I keep constantly saying we need to equality proof the equality action. There's 2 stages to get there. But the other side of it, the personal representation and being the change makers and being the people that you can see and aspire to becoming, that I would be much more hopeful about. And I think a lot of that is really being led out in the UK with the likes of Liz Carr and Mik and Matt Fraser and there's so many wonderful people that have emerged over the years. And then of course Crip Camp has been phenomenal. It's such a strong, positive, I was just, the joy when I watched it and the power that came from it. And I'm really looking forward. We've got one, well, not we, sorry, I'm Irish. The UK have one, but we'll claim you anyway, coming out soon, which is When Barbara Met Johnny. And that's, the birth of, the Dan movement. Maybe you know a bit more about this than I would. And I have the joy of knowing Barbara Lasicki. So perhaps you know Johnny. I think he ended up jumping ship over to the US, didn't he, at some stage? But so I would be very hopeful. And these sort of events, where the people that can actually help us and work with us to affect change, are so essential.
Mik, before you begin, could I just pop in one thought here, which is that indeed it's very important to have representation in front of the camera, but it's just as important that we have positions as directors, producers, executives, grips, cinematographers, and that the push for helping us get employment where we've never been seen before is essential. And it's not that difficult. If you look at what other programs have been done to promote marginalized communities through internships and other programs, it's not really that difficult to do that also for people with disabilities. So,
yeah, that's funny enough, Jim. That was what I was going to say. I think that's the thing that's changed. I have a funny relationship with this idea that things are getting better, because I started in 1989. I got discovered. I broke into the media, into television, and by 92, I was working in a department at the BBC that was entirely staffed by disabled people, disabled series editor, disabled editors, producers, directors, researchers, everybody, the people that did all the planning, everyone in that whole department of 40, 50, 60 people, a whole floor of one of the areas of the BBC was filled entirely with disabled creatives. And we made From the Edge over the edge for 10 years, and we advise the BBC. So people think about using language like wheelchair bound, handicap, all that stuff that's crept back. But back then we were really strict on it. And for a while, the BBC had a directive of what language to use. But then in the end of the 90s, there was a kind of mind shift, and it was all about inclusion. And so they closed the department and pushed us all on the dole queue. We were all included out of work. And it's taken, like Kim Taziki was one of the young presenters on that. And it's taken her all that time to rebuild a career as a producer and as a director of radio and television and as a presenter. And so many of us just lost it because we just couldn't, you know, the ability to get into the media is tough. Getting back into the media is almost impossible. So the career arc just dies. So what we're seeing now, I think, is actually we're regaining ground in the UK, and everyone's going, hurrah, isn't it wonderful? And kind of, I always feel like it's only wonderful if you forget what came before. If you think about the fact that Matt and Liz and myself and Nabil and you know, and even Adi, you know, Adi Adepitan, we're talking about people that started their career in the 90s.
1990, I seen you doing Beat That.
Yeah, 1992, I won the Emmy. Yeah. We got a BAFTA nomination. I was voted Children's TV Presenter of the Year. All this stuff happened, and yet the career development for all of these people has been glacial, if at all. So you know, Liz has finally cracked it, but Liz has been going at it for years, and I think that, you know, everyone thinks that, like, young people kind of go, oh, there's no representation. And it's like, what you mean is there's the same level of crap representation as there has been for decades, because there'll be one or two of us and then they'll go, that'll do, we've done it. And it's like, what we need now is to stop patting ourselves on the back for doing it and just do it. And I think that's the thing that I hope will change now. But I also agree with Jim that what's happened for the first time is that people are going into mainstream production who are disabled behind the scenes. You know, like David Proud wrote tonight's episode of Coronation Street, the first one. So that's a disabled man writing storylines, nothing, you know, not disabled led, that are just about stories that people watch. And I think that will get the change, because then our stories will be told by us. They'll be empowered when they are about disability and being one of our community. It will be us telling a story that's realistic. I stopped acting in things because I started off with The Bill, with 2.4 Children, in Brookside, all that kind of stuff. And the stories were kind of realistic. And then all of a sudden, all I ever got was disabled man, suicidal over not being able to have sex, asking his wife to leave him because he's not a man anymore. And it wasn't one, it was every single script, you know, including one where I jumped off the roof of a hospital. And when in the audition, I said, but they don't have lifts to hospital roofs for this very reason. And instead they gave the role to someone that wasn't disabled, and he dutifully jumped off the roof of the hospital. So, you know, that will...
Well, you can't even kill yourself as a disabled person.
Exactly. I mean, you can't...
What's going on with this?
Actually, the bloke that wrote it was based on a real story. And I said, well, it can't be, because you can't jump off a hospital. And he went, well, actually what he did was he went home and jumped off the roof of a car park. So I said, well, why didn't you write that? And he went, well, I needed to cut a scene.
And it's right though. I think you're 100% right. You need to have people behind, but telling our stories. One name pops to my mind is Jack Thornley. I mean, he did Cast Offs was an awesome series. It was Matt Fraser. There was a young lad from Northern Ireland. It was his first time acting. Whole disabled cast, but good actors. Like, I mean, they weren't there for tokenism or to stick them in front of the camera. And I think it's Stephen Hawking said, and I use me, we should be judging our own values, and we should be judging our own values, you know. And I always go back to that. It's almost like a little motto to myself. I have a skewed view of the world, but I think that's interesting what you say about. I remember BBC Three were really pushing out this stuff in Britain, and then they seem to have gone digital and they just forgot all about it. Adam Pearson, we had him on one night, and he was brilliant. He was great crack. I really enjoyed talking to Adam. And you know, Hastley's ideas that are coming up, and shows like the Undateables was something that I think, actually, what did you think of the Undateables?
I loathed it.
Did you? Why?
I'll tell you why I loathed it, because I know they rang me up and asked me, did I want to be on it? And I said, what, you mean as a presenter? And they went, no, we're not having a presenter. I went, oh, what, you mean as a voiceover artist? And they went, no, we're not having a voice. We've got the voiceover artist. So I said, well, what do you want me on for then? They went, well, we want you to come on as a contributor. I said, well, I'm married. And they said, oh, that doesn't matter. We'll mock it up. So I'm sorry. The Undateables is an absolute sham, and I loathe it.
What do you call it? Disability porn.
It's the worst kind of, you know, it's not first dates with disabled people. It's saying these people are different and they can't find love and they're a bit weird. And however sweet and saccharine you make it, it's still a show for othering us. It's and I said, well, why is it called Undateables? And they said, well, oh, well, what would you say? I said, well, call it Dateables. And they said, oh no, we've chosen the name now. So that's where the dropping off came from. Because I said, well, at least drop the blooming off. And you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm sorry, I could go on about that all night, but I think that is one of those programs that highlights people watch it and go, oh, isn't it great? And it's like, we're so underserved that we think a program that says, look at this lot of hideous pig monsters that can't get love. Let's make a program about them. Oh, look, they're finding love. Isn't it sweet? And we're happy. And we should be.
We're delighted. There was
And
one on
there
TLC.
is
More cross about that than any telethon in my book.
I remember a few years ago, my husband and I had been asked to participate. A production company were doing a show for RTE, and it was about disability and sexuality. And they asked us to be one of the couples participating in it. And we spent all day filming with them. But in the end, because they weren't getting the narrative of that, the negative, oh, it's so difficult, mixed ability couple, blah, 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 they end up making an excuse to actually cut us from the show. They gave some technical problems with recording excuse. But the problem was that it just, our story was too positive. Not that, oh yeah, our life is great, but it was empowered. And it wasn't, oh, this is terrible, we've got so many problems, life's so hard. And so we didn't fit the narrative, the negative narrative that they were going
funny, actually,
for.
Selina, I had exactly that. On Matt's show, actually, on Freak Out, we were on Freak Out on the first episode talking about going to fetish clubs, which at the moment
I remember that.
And they filmed us and they went to a club and everything was great. And then they interviewed my wife and they said to her, you know, are you into Mik's being disabled? Like, you know, is it a kink? And she went, well, no, of course not. But I love him. And part of him is being disabled. So I love him being disabled. And they edited it so that it sounded like she said, I love him because he's disabled. And she was heartbroken, you know, and I demanded the right to see the cut before it went out. And they sent me the VHS. It shows how long ago it was. The day it went out, about an hour, it arrived by taxi and it was way too late, nothing I could do about it. And we watched it and she was in tears because she said, no, that's made me seem like some kind of weirdo. And it's invalidated our love. And I think that's one of the big things that has to change. They have to, if, you know, they cannot keep making us fit the story. I mean, I walked off of a BBC documentary because they were trying to make me tell a story that I didn't want to tell. And they were saying, well, if you don't tell the story, you know, I was saying I can see another story here that is much more empowering, but really will touch the hearts of disabled people. And they were like, no, I've written this. I know what the script is. And it's like, it's a bloody documentary. You don't write scripts for a documentary. You film stuff and then you find out what happens. But all this scripted reality stuff has poisoned what we get. And we get told what we're going to say. We're pushed into a direction. And because we aren't represented behind the scenes, as Jim said, you end up with a situation where you've got loads of people. The media is filled with people who don't want to be disabled because it's all about beauty and wonder and physicality. Actors don't want to be disabled. Presenters don't. Producers don't. Everyone. So they're terrified. So they tell that story. And until we tell our story and say, actually, it's not that bad. Honestly, folks, it's pretty good, really. You know what I mean? In fact, it can be wonderful. Then we'll get the realization. So I think that's the big take from all of this is we need to be everywhere, not just on screen. In fact,
ubiquitous.
We need the narrative to change as well, because even down to the fact that we're being used as ammunition for other people's arguments. Like when we had the whole repeal the 8th process here in relation to the abortion laws, both sides were using disabled people's lives as their ammunition, without any consent from disabled people to be used in that way. And it's like, so it's always say, yeah, we're looking for this negative, kind of charity dependent narrative, even down to there was a road safety campaign in Ireland a few years ago called Crashed Lives. And basically the message that came from most of the ads in it was worse death, disability, and to become disabled was worse than death. That was basically the narratives that they were giving within this road safety campaign. And when you've got people being pumped out to people across all different media channels, of course it's going to be difficult for them to have a positive, kind of belief and ability, in disabled people and being a disabled person, and the positive and empowered side of life that can be.
Yeah, and I think that's there's a residual psychological fear of disability. It's always used as a beaten stick, and that actually is answered part of the question. And I think what Mik was saying about documentaries and things. Let's ask the award-winning documentary maker himself, Jim. What the guys were talking about was Undateables. It's a TV show that was on like TLC, and they put disabled people going out with non-disabled people, and it was highly popular. It's like 9 seasons. There was also one on the TLC channel, my favorite channel, which was horrendous, which was all these people who had acquired impairments, and it was like they were afraid to, it was like a big reveal. Oh, I got a colostomy bag. So that one was even worse down the spectrum. But Jim, and I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to go on to Selina and Mik then. This is I suppose this sums it up. What can you say as a professional who's been working in the industry for the last 30 years, and you've been at the forefront of sound design, and documentaries has been your mainstay, and whether that's from like The Rape of Roper, and you even worked on The Devil and Mrs. Johnson. I mean, or Devil and Daniel Johnson, which is one of my favorite documentaries. And what do the media, what do the folks, the vloggers, the bloggers, the rogues, the journalists, what do they need to take away from this to do better when they're representing disabled people? And then we go to Selina and Mik the same question. We'll start with you, Jim.
I mean, I think like with any time that you are covering a story or being a journalist about a group, that you have to educate yourself, that you have to go well beyond your preconceived notions, and that ignorance is dangerous. And so it's really essential not only to do your research, but to really engage. And I mean, that's essential. I mean, the fact that we still, we see people saying wheelchair bound in articles and stuff is just maddening. It's like, why hasn't this person seen the memo? So, I mean, that's my quick answer on that.
Well, that's a perfect answer. And you know what? We actually have the memo. We have produced a document about how disabled people want to be represented in Ireland, and we're going to be talking about that later on, Jim. Thanks a million. That's great. Yeah. Selina, what do you think?
I think, definitely, I think the important thing is that disabled people are controlling the narrative, or at least contributing to the narrative that's being developed. The whole kind of respecting and valuing the voice of lived experience is absolutely essential. I'm not as a DP, a disabled persons organization member, that we're not anti non-disabled, it's not a them and us situation, but we need people to be listening and valuing the voice of our experience, because there's many benefits to that, whether it's in building design, saving having to knock down a wall after you build a building, or whether it's designing services that meet everybody's needs without having to go back and retrofit or be taken to court under equality legislation. There's actually financial benefits as well as equality and human rights benefits. But I think what we need to, I've heard often the disabled people's movement being referred to as kind of the last great civil rights movement. And I think it is a way of, maybe not the last great, but certainly, but there's always going to be somebody who needs to fight for their rights. We're never going to have a perfect world. But I think it is important to see these issues as equality and human rights issues, because, we've been in the States with the Black Lives Matter originating from there in recent years now. But they're like, you know, it's not acceptable. Like the black and white minstrels are not acceptable anymore. You know, people are not accepting people blacking up to play a black role, or going into drag to pretend to be a woman, you know. So why is it acceptable for non-disabled people to pretend to be disabled? You know, so these narratives need to change, these practices need to change. And I think Jim is absolutely right as well in relation, and Mik, in relation to the fact that it's not just about what you see in front of the camera or printed in the media. It has to be the people actually in the background that are the people with lived experience as well, so that our experience is valued in all ways. So like in Ireland, for example, I think there are programs there that could be used more perhaps by the media industry, like the WAM. There's an employment internship program here called WAM, which is Willing, Able and Mentoring. And that's all about supporting disabled graduates into paid internships in all aspects of employment and different companies and disciplines. So I think we can find, there are routes there that we can kind of maybe not quite obviously go, oh, that's media route, but we can grab it and use it and get people into all those disciplines in different ways.
Thanks a million, Selina. And Mik, finally to you. Thank you so much.
Ironically, the first documentary I ever made was called Willing and Able, but it was about disability and sex. And it is available on YouTube if you want to see a youthful 24-year-old Mik Scarlet.
I'm Googling it now.
Yeah, well funny. I would say if I was going to talk to the media, which I try to do, but the older I get and the more radical I get, the less they listen. One, don't forget that we are this massive untapped source of talent. You're always talking about ideas, you're talking about talent. Disabled people have been ignored, and yet there are so many brilliant, skilled, amazing disabled people that if you give a chance to, you will see them blossom, and it will benefit your output, whatever angle they take, whatever career they follow. So stop thinking that we're going to be difficult and start thinking that actually working with us to create a better industry. The industry is very, very fixed on this is how we do it. And it means that people burn out at a terrible rate. Whereas if you work with us to make a flexible way of making your media, then you end up with a media that people can have longevity in, disabled or not. So that's a really important bit. But also, our stories have never really been told. And if you're always going on about stories, everyone you meet, oh, stories, we need stories, what program ideas, we untapped, and everybody is different. You can have 4 wheelchair users in a room and our stories are entirely different. So it means that you've got all of that wonderful storytelling. Some can be joyful, some can be tragic, some can be, you know, that's what we miss. We miss the reality of it. You know, we normally see tragedy or sadness. We never see joy and happiness, and then a bit of tragedy and like life. And our stories are amazing. And also, don't forget that we are the only demographic that every other demographic can join. So when you're making telly for us, about us, what you're doing as well is you're supporting people who the next day join our gang. So it means, you know, people don't want to see disability. Well, actually, they do. Beat That, a show made for kids, had over 2 million viewers in the UK every week and was sold to Ireland, was sold to Canada, to America, to Australia. It made millions for Channel 4. Didn't make any money for me, I'll tell you. And that was just a little cheap kids TV show. Back in the days when people said no one wanted to watch disability, now we know, we've seen Crip Camp, we know there's a market. So come on, stop thinking about us as bad, talentless, hard to find and bad stories. We are there, we have great stories, and give us a chance and it will work out for you.
You know, it's not charity, it's good business. It's good business.
Jim, that's fantastic, because you know what? This is one of the problems with issues with Ireland, is that everyone here is disabled. You know, I'm disabled, you guys are disabled. You're professionals in the media, I'm unprofessional. But the point is that when you talk to disabled people, you get the answers. You know, don't talk to big charities. In Ireland, the big service providers and the big charities have always been the go-to people about disability and what disabled people want. We're not trusted to talk. And you know, when you talk to cats about mice, you're only going to hear about cheese. So I mean, that's all it's going to be if cheese is plenty of money, and that's always going to be that. And you said it right there. It's good business. It makes sense. It's exciting stories, and like Selina said, there's aspects to it. Folks, thank you so much. I've had more fun than I should have when I'm working. I've really learned so much tonight, and thank you so much.
Can I just say, I just want to say to the disabled people watching,
yep,
for the first time ever in the history of humanity and media, you can sidestep mainstream media. You don't need to go, how am I going to make television? I can't get a TV show. Do it yourself. Make your own films, make your own documentaries, put them online, do your own music, do your own art. Like, you know, we don't need the big businesses anymore. You can do it yourself. And then they come to you, and then they beg you to join them, and it's a power thing. So tell your own stories, even if it's on, you know, TikTok. Do that, and that is a way of changing the world just as much as doing an hour-long documentary series. You know, it's simple.
James, can I just give you the URL for Forward Doc?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
It's fwd-doc.org.
FWD dot
.org, and really welcome people to go there, go to our Facebook group, and but we have about 400 members, and you don't have to be disabled to join us. Allies are always accepted, and I just want to tell you how meaningful it was to be invited to be with you this evening. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I've loved every moment of it. So thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. And Selina, I know Selina's our secretary, and Selina's a board member, and she'd be, you know, she knows more about this than us, but it's an absolute pleasure to have you here tonight. I've really enjoyed this. You know, most of the time I hate my job, but tonight I love it. And I can feel my CEO creeping over me. Like, we're going to share that tonight, that website. Mik, Selina, Jim, thanks a million. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, James. And can I say you've done a great job, James, as always. Very proud
well,
to
I
have
don't
you
know
on
yet. It's not
board
over
with
yet,
ILMI.
Selina. I don't
You
know
always
yet.
represent us well.
Thanks a million. I don't know. I'm half drunk, but we'll say thanks a million, Selina. I really appreciate it. So, folks, thank you so much. I mean, I tell you, that was amazing. I'm a little bit shocked by that now, but we're going to forward on Jim's website here afterwards to everyone that's registered, and we're going to put it in our news or e-bulletin as well. So it'll be on our social media channels. I thought that was fantastic. I mean, just listening to three people who, as I said, they're legends in their field, and learning from them and hearing their stories, and everything is connected. And just again, like Jim, like Selina, like Mik said, come to disabled people when you want to find out about disability. You don't go to Men's Shed and talk to them about women's groups. So, you know, for the broadcasters there, you get the juicy bits here. You know, we get ourselves in trouble, and that's okay. So, to talk about the current field of you know, what's going on in diversity in the media at the moment in Ireland, we're very lucky to have Dr. Páraic Kerrigan live from.
Sorry, James, I think you cut off, but thanks for all that. It's great to join you all. Can you hear me just to start?
We can hear you perfectly. Sorry, Damien muted me. He did think I was literally drunk. I don't drink. But Páraic, you're a Maynooth.
I'm actually in the School of Information and Communication at UCD. So
fantastic. Sorry, Páraic.
Basically, just what I can contribute here to tonight, after, you know, the fabulous speakers from Claire to Jim to Mik to Selina, I'm kind of going to be repeating a few things that they've said, but my perspective is I research diversity and inclusion in the media, and I work alongside colleagues from Maynooth to Mary I in Limerick to look at how we could develop pragmatic pipelines, pragmatic solutions to solve these issues. You know, that panel discussion there saw discussions around not only representation, but production. And it's really important that we get more diverse people into production cultures, because that's where you get the real change happening. That's where you get the real pipelines of talent happening. So what I want to do in just this very brief 5 minutes that I have today is basically just offer to you some solutions or pragmatic tools and measures that some colleagues and myself have recommended. And then also I've started doing some research working with varying different media activist groups, of which include disabled people. And I just want to include some of their perspectives in that. So I might actually start with that, which has been really interesting. And what kind of came from a lot of that research was that a lot of disabled people wanted the media itself, the mainstream media institutions, the RTEs, the Virgin Medias, to stop actually going to lobby groups or large service providers to get a disabled perspective. Now I see you're nodding your head there, and a lot of other people are probably nodding their heads as well. And this is an issue endemic to diverse groups more broadly. They just seem to go to these service providers that don't actually speak for the communities or the issues at hand. So across the board, and including in the disabled community, ask them about themselves to speak about themselves. So a very simple but pragmatic solution. Go to the likes of you folks and just say, have you got someone that can speak to this issue? So that's one solution. Also, and really important, and something that doesn't get an awful lot of attention, is the diversity of disability. Oftentimes, and Selina, I think you may have stolen the great term that I was going to use, but I'll forgive you, disability porn. We see, again, the likes of, Irish media and traditional media utilizing representational shorthands, which is often, and I say this in inverted commas here, the wheelchair-bound boy or girl or person. And this in and of itself is the representational shorthand that is used recurringly and recurringly. So even just a number of months back, we saw a minister in the current government in Ireland raising awareness around wheelchairs by sitting in a wheelchair. So there's a clear diversity literacy that needs to be developed for the broader media. So to move away from disability porn, and then quite crucially, again, do not pigeonhole people into their identity. And this is kind of one strategy that we've developed and have recommended to kind of top-down executives in media, which is to actually develop and use researchers in media production companies, develop a list of people that can speak on a number of issues. Disabled people don't just speak about disability. There are disabled people that are academic experts on housing, on economics. There are people that are experts on election statistics that could be really useful during, the next general election coverage in RTE. The point is, stop using the same faces over and over again. Open yourselves up to researching the people that are out there and incorporate them and bring them into the fold. There are plenty of people that are experts beyond just what their identity is. They are not defined solely by their identity. So these are just some of the solutions that could be, that could help the issues identified by disabled people. But just some broader things then. Some research we've done is, and I'm going to mention this and people will probably go, well, what does the data actually do? But the data does speak. So one of the first solutions we recommend more broadly is data monitoring and gathering. So this is to actually develop robust data gathering mechanisms, because what we found is when you go to the media, they'll always say, but where is the data? And it helps to start the conversation saying, well, here is the data. 2% of the participants on primetime last season were disabled people. So you can start that conversation by going, this is not representative of the population as a whole. So from that, you can also use data as incentives and supports for production companies and sectoral organizations to engage with data gathering and monitoring. So you can actually start getting production companies that aren't necessarily mainstream thinking about their own HR resourcing, and kind of they might have an idea going, this is actually something I've never thought of. But now, because we're data gathering, I'm actually cognizant of this. We need to develop pipelines to perhaps third level colleges to get disabled people in, or people of color and whatnot. So, a pragmatic solution, but something that works. And then, from data gathering, we also recommend diversity standards. So, development of diversity boards that are composed of a range of diverse individuals and actors, and put them into organizations such as Screen Ireland, RTE, TG Cahir, Virgin Media, even the BAI. I'm sure Stephanie is going to speak on some strategies or positions of the BAI in a few minutes' time. And from that then, something really crucial, money talks in this industry, right? We all know it's a capitalistic imperative, the media. It is generally for profit. But as Mik says, we can sidestep that and, establish it. But unfortunately, the system is generally for profit. So objective setting and incentivization is another really important strategy that could be developed. So developing funding calls that incentivize inclusion and diversity within production teams, incentivizing production companies and industry actors to develop their own diversity and inclusion policies. And then objective setting simply around the likes of creative output, you know, encouraging colorblind casting in television or drama productions, or developing particular codes of practice. So that's another kind of way in which objective setting could be a pragmatic solution. And the last bit then, and I will stop my ramblings then, but diverse recruitment for the industry itself. So, you know, we think more capital needs to actually be put into this, very much like how the Department of Taoiseach a number of years ago, back in the 2010s, put lots of money into, you know, digital media and the digital age that was coming. Diversity is an industry that generates so much income. And you know, that last panel spoke to this. Money does talk. So what we recommend is diverse recruitment, where there's subsidization of sustainable diverse recruitment to the independent sector through additional funding. If they're saying they're having problems in terms of hiring more people because there's staffing shortages, well, then give more money to the independent sector to give them the opportunities to perhaps make diverse recruiting hires. Why not, you know, develop state-led schemes to increase funding for additional long-term sustainable and permanent jobs? And it's not just about, you know, having an intern scheme for a disabled person to come in for 12 weeks. It's important to think long-term and actually have sustainable long-term career paths for them as well. And the last point then is getting researchers, and this is like a really simple one, but something we need to get radio researchers, TV researchers, independent production company researchers to do, which is to develop a diverse list of speakers and media contributors that can speak to a range of issues that is not just solely to do with their identity. Just seeing somebody, you know, seeing a disabled person talking about the housing crisis, you know, just there on RTE 61 talking about the housing crisis, and then that's their segment done. You know, that's something quite powerful in that kind of representation, I think. Simple but powerful. So James, I was given 5 minutes, so I hope that has given some food for thought at the very least. These aren't perfect solutions that would be fixed overnight, but how myself and my colleagues would envisage them is to start conversations and create long-term sustainable pipelines for diversity in the media industry.
Thanks a million, Páraic. You know, anyone that says that you know, academia isn't sexy, it is. It's not for sexy for me, but that is really that's fantastic. And like you said, it is the data. One point there. And I talked to Páraic too myself when we was doing the research, and it's a diversity of intersectionality of disability. You know, there's an assumption by the media. I think it's, you know, guys, you're not doing so great here, but there's an assumption that disability is, you know, a pretty person in a wheelchair or Paralympian. It's not. There's an intersectionality. Disabled people are all different types of people, you know. And there's all different types of DPOs. We're a DPO, a disabled persons organisation, but there's Disabled Women of Ireland. We have the Irish Deaf Society. We have the National Platform of Self-Advocates. We have Full Spectrum Ireland, which is Ireland's first LGBT plus disabled person space. So there are spaces there. There's no excuse to say, well, there's no DPOs to go to, so we're going to go to the big lobby groups, or we're going to go to the big service providers. That's nonsense. It's there. So they're there. And that's what one thing I think too tonight, along with everything else, is to take from that, is that we're here, we've been here for a long time, but you know, we're not going to ask to represent ourselves anymore. We're just going to represent ourselves. So thank you so much, Páraic. That was awesome. And that leads us on nicely to how we want to be represented and why we feel that we're being represented badly. Last year, well, not why we feel we're represented badly, we are being represented badly. Last year, the 1st of December, we had a webinar like this, and we had workshops. Mik was there, team was there. It was really great. And we went through our collective, and that's how we do things in ILMI. We try and get the view of disabled people and pass on that authenticity. That's what we try. We don't interpret it, we put it straight forward. And that's how we do that. We're not there to change it. So my new colleague, Paula, is going to give us a brief outline of the policy paper, which is on our website, ilmi.ie, and everybody will be getting it tonight. It's your one for everyone in the audience. It's not a weekend in Kerry. It's going to be our, like, you know, decking. It's going to be a policy document. So Paula, would you like to talk a little bit about that document first, please?
Thank you so much, James. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Soraghan. I am a proud disabled woman, activist, and member of the ILMI team. I'm delighted to present the Our Lives, Our Voices paper for this event. Our vision in ILMI is an Ireland where disabled persons have freedom, choice, and control over all aspects of our lives and can fully participate in an inclusive society as equals. The three areas from the Our Lives, Our Voices report that I will discuss tonight are: 1, how do we as disabled people feel we are represented in Irish media? 2, how we as disabled people would like to be represented in the Irish media? And 3, what do we as disabled people want to see from media companies in Ireland? Firstly, how do we as disabled people feel we are represented in Irish media? The main narrative is either one of tragedy of our impairments or the inspirational disabled person who has overcome our impairments. Disability is seen through the medical model lens in the Irish media as a charity issue, and the narrative is often poor them. Disabled people are often only sought out to give our personal stories and not about how society disables us and prevents our full and active participation in society. Too often, our voices are not heard. Discussions around disabled people is through the voices of carers or parents. Disabled people's lives are discussed in terms of how the family copes, often without disabled people being present or engaged with. Secondly, how disabled people would like to be represented in the Irish media. Disabled people want to see ourselves fully represented in the Irish media. We share the same issues as everyone else and want to be seen as part of society with the same range of interests, passions, emotions, and the fullness of human experience. We are parents, siblings, work colleagues, employers, and lovers. We simply want to be accepted as another slice of life, not a worst-case scenario or a fate worse than death. Disabled people should not be defined by their impairment. This has to change. Being disabled is not a tragedy, and we do not want or need pity. We need to engage and employ disabled people to ensure we avoid continually portraying these offensive tropes. Finally, what do disabled people want to see from media companies in Ireland? We as disabled people are directly involved in the production of media as presenters, writers, actors, producers, directors, and audience members. Include disabled people's voices where they are missing in terms of coverage surrounding homelessness, hate crime, unemployment, and education. Avoid the tragedy narrative to ensure all mainstream media is accessible to all, accommodating access needs and communication differences for everyone. In Ireland, we need to plan, resource, and implement real inclusion in media for disabled people in the 21st century. This can be done by directly consulting and engaging with us as disabled people who have the real lived experience of disability, and by engaging with the disabled persons organisations who are led by and for disabled people. To sum it all up, we need you as the Irish media to work with us as disabled people to ensure a better future for everybody. If you would like to get a report or find out more about our work, please email info@ilmi.ie or visit our website www.ilmi.ie. Nothing about us without us.
Good on you, Paula. That's great. Fair play. Thanks so much. I love the purple too. Good stuff. That's great. Yeah. And as Paula said, the document is there. The document is authentic. It's created with disabled people's voices, and with their opinions. I mean, we've done the work for you, and it's just there to have a look at and use that language. And you know, diversity is not a pizza that you can just take one slice. You go hell for leather and you have to have all of it. You can't just have one piece and say that's all we're doing. You have to have all of it, and that's what we're very passionate about in ILMI, and that's one thing that I'm delighted to be, you know, privileged to take part in it. So that was fantastic. Thanks a million, Paula. So speaking of which, we are very delighted to have Stephanie Comey from the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland here who's going to talk to us about the work that you guys are doing. Stephanie, I'm not going to give off that I can't get RT player, but I can't. But I'll call you afterwards about that.
Thanks very much, James, and thank you so much for the invitation to come here and to meet you and to listen to you. I think that was a really important exercise in itself. I'll introduce myself very briefly. I don't have a lot of time. Nina said 2 minutes. I forgot to tell Nina that I'm a very talkative person.
No, take your time. Take your time. Honest to God, take your time.
So there might be a few things to say. So we're the regulator for broadcasting in Ireland. So that includes radio and television services, public service media, commercial media, community media. We've been working with all those organisations for a number of years, and I think I'd like to think that diversity, equality, and inclusion are important elements of how we regulate the sector. We do lots of things. We do policy, we do codes, we do research, we do complaints from the public, we do loads of things. We've worked closely with Páraic recently on, and his colleagues on important audit, if you like, of diversity, inclusion and equality processes and policies from the media itself. So we have a lot of information. Part of me tonight is really energized by lots of ideas coming up as to what we can do next. Part of me is a little bit relieved that actually we're on the right track, where everything that I've heard tonight is, is something that we have, talked about, thought about, liaised with other stakeholders about. That's all very helpful. Part of me is a little bit sad, I guess, that this is February 2022 and we're still having to have those conversations. So that's not good, and that really needs to change. So I think what I'd like to say tonight is that the BAI has an objective about fostering a media landscape that is representative of and accessible to the diversity of Irish society. That's what we try to put at the centre of our work every day. And I know there's a lot of people here today that I know in other guises of life and that I've worked with in other guises of life. And I think what I'd like to say is that there's two elements to that representation and accessibility. It's both on air, off air, on screen and off screen. So it's about what Páraic was talking about, supporting and creating pipelines to access more diverse talent. And it's also about those stories. We like to say that in Ireland, we're a nation of storytellers. And there are plenty of stories that we haven't heard or that are not told properly. And that's what I'm really getting out of this session tonight. So what I'd like to get back to the office with and to move forward is how we help create those pipeline, the issues that Paula was talking about, the experience that Claire was relating earlier on, and then the fabulous panel, Selina and Jim and Mik, like trying to take all of that and distill it into practical actions that can actually deliver change on the ground. And I'm optimistic enough, even though I'm a little bit sad that we're still having those conversations, I'm optimistic enough to believe that can happen. And I know that in the sector with broadcasters, RT, TG Cahir, a lot of radio broadcasters, a lot of them are doing amazing stuff individually, and maybe there is strength in numbers, and it's trying to bring all of that together so that we are consistently doing better about the representation and the accessibility of disabled people in the media. And it doesn't sound like it's an impossible task. It sounds like it's a very doable task, and it just requires a little bit of coordination and a little bit of goodwill. And I cannot believe that it can't be done. And what I'd like to do today is to ask ILMI to work with us, with the BAI, and to try and set up, discussions and platforms and conversations with the media, with the organizations that we work with on a daily basis, so that we can move this on. Because I don't really want to have those conversations anymore. I just want to see change. I don't want to be here in a year's time or 5 years' time listening to you having the same conversations. That is not, that would be a failure. We can aspire to a better world. I'm not sure we can aspire to a perfect world. We need to be realistic, but we certainly can aspire to a better one. And there's no way that we can't work together to make that happen. So again, I want to say thank you. I'm very humbled actually tonight. It's been a long day, I guess, but I'm very grateful for your invitation, because I think these are such important conversations to be having. And now I'd like to have more of those with more people around the table from other organizations. And I know that there's people here in the audience today that I know I will reach out to tomorrow and get this show on the road.
Thanks a million, Stephanie. And Stephanie, that's great to hear that, you know, I mean, I know it sounds depressing, but the thing is we're doing this and it's great that you're here, and it shows that you're ready to engage with us, and we'd be delighted to. And thank you again so much. It's been fantastic. So yeah, great. We're excited about that. Optimism is good. Perfect is bad, because there's no such thing as perfect. But optimism is great. We like optimism. Optimism is great. Tinged with a bit of cynicism, but it's great. So finally, second, before I introduce John Kelly, we have our final few words from our CEO extraordinaire, Damien, and fair play to Damien tonight and to Nina for, I mean, I know I make this look flawless, but I'm sorry. I mean, really behind the scenes, we're not a production company. We don't have Zoom contractors. We're kind of just not making up as we go along, but we've been using technology for a while, and we're doing this ourselves. So to be fair, Nina, behind the scenes for the last few weeks, has been cracking the whip and really pulling it together. And Damien, sick as a small hospital, is working behind the scenes tonight. So fair play to him. So Damien, I'll just put it over to you before I go to John Kelly.
Many thanks, James. I'll be very brief because I appreciate we've run slightly over, but I'm sure anyone who's attended or is watching this at a later stage will appreciate that it was worth the wait. It was worth spending some time with fantastic inputs. A truly just wonderful panel discussion and ably emceed by James. Before I go with the closeout message, I just want to thank everyone for participating, people who attended tonight and registered to be part of it. I'd like to thank my colleagues Claire and Paula for their inputs, which were absolutely superb. I'd like to thank Des as our chair for opening up the event. I'd like to thank our panel, Selina, our vice chair, James LeBrecht and Mik Scarlet. That was something I could have listened to for a long, long time. And I know the feedback on Twitter has been superb. I'd like to thank Páraic, and I'd like to thank Stephanie as well, to bring that outside expertise into our discussion, which is really important. I'd like to thank Darren and Elizabeth for providing sign language interpretation. I'd like to thank James. He's done a fantastic job as an MC. He always does. He links it so supremely together. And I do think it's important to recognize the entire ILMI staff team who have worked strenuously to get people to attend this, to promote it, to encourage it. And last but not least, Nina, who has put in a huge amount of work to make this event happen, which James has said comes from a discussion space we had over 12 months ago, where we'd over 60 disabled activists in a discussion around how they'd like to change the narrative and how disabled people are portrayed in the media. So tonight is not the end point of that. Tonight is the start of that conversation, and bringing Stephanie into that and her words are really reassuring, because what we want to do is to reach out to the media, to the producers, the creators, the script writers, the radio and television and print broadcasters, to say the narrative needs to change, but you've got expertise here. We've got a fantastic publication that is now live on our website, Our Lives, Our Voices. You've heard from disabled experts tonight who hopefully will change your perception and think differently about how you need to directly engage with disabled people in generating the content that is needed for a truly inclusive 21st century Ireland. ILMI, as a disabled persons organisation, is about creating a more inclusive society. We are about social change. The media has a significant role in creating and shaping that narrative around inclusion. And as Selina has said at the outset, it's one of the areas in Ireland that we've done little on, or very little on, in terms of inclusion. And just echoing my colleagues Claire's words right at the start, disabled people need to see themselves in the media to feel part of society. So I do think if that's the message we can get from anyone who's participating from a media perspective from tonight, that they're thinking, we do need to think differently, but we now have a mechanism and a way to think differently. And as Stephanie said, let's reach out to ILMI and the other DPOs and begin that conversation. We hope tonight has been that first stage in that point. James, I'll lead it back to yourself to close out. Thanks so much, James, for what you've done tonight. Well done.
Thanks a million, boss. And I mean, I gotta say thanks to all the crew for working tonight, like Claire and Paula, and the gang, and Páraic and Stephanie for coming, and Mik and Selina and Jim, and folks, you know what? Talk to us. Talk to us is where you're going to get the good stuff. You're missing a trick. The disability rights narrative in this country is huge. It's vibrant. It's exciting. I mean, we were doing things during the lockdown that weren't even, highlighted. Disabled people awoke because they were creative anyway. And the narrative of disabled people cocooning in their house, hiding away from society, isn't one that I recognized. So finally tonight, and thank you so much for coming. Finally tonight, we're delighted to invite and have our guest, the fantastic troubadour, John Kelly. John, how are things?
I'm fine. How are you, James?
I'm great.
The worst thing about being last is the Guinness is nearly finished.
Oh, that's all right, John. I've been drinking a bottle of Powers since. They don't believe me, but I've been sucking it down. John, I believe you're...
I've got one last bit left here, in the glass.
Deadly. And John, I believe you're going to do an acoustic version of Rage Against the Machine's 1992 classic, Killing in the Name of.
Who told you that?
It's the drink. John, over to you. Thanks a million, folks. So long.
James, thanks ever so much, and thanks to everyone for having us. It's great to be here, and I'm finishing off tonight. It's lovely to be here. I'm over in London, but my family are from the borders of Limerick and Kerry. And to audio describe myself, I'm a white Irish male with brown going grey hair with a kiss curl that's been handed down from my grandfather to me and my father. I'm in my living room and my office, and I've got the roaring fire on the TV, and I've got a sign for Abbeyfield and a sign for Arte, and that's where my folks from in Ireland. And I'm going to play a song off my new album, and I'm hoping to come over to Ireland in the summer to promote the album. So if anybody wants me on the show, I'd be very happy to be on the Late Late Show to do a little number for you. It would be a privilege. I've got a song written by my great-great-granddad, who was... he sent some shamrock over to my great uncle over in America back in the early 1900s, and it's called The Shamrock You Sent Me. And I'm not going to play that one tonight because we need a raucous ending. So that one was a bit too gentle, but The Shamrock You Sent Me, and I'd love to come over and play that for you in the summer. But it's lovely to be here, and thanks very much. I've got a few buttons to press before I start playing. I'm going to be playing my Telecaster, a bespoke guitar that I've made with some technologists. Nina wanted me to do We Will Rock You. That's what she said.
That's fine, John. I was only taking the mickey. I don't even take myself seriously. I'm a joke.
So James, I haven't got the whole band here, or I do. We will rock you. But I haven't got the band, so I'm not going to do it. So anyway, this one, I'm going to press a few buttons. I've done all the lighting and camera work myself, so I hope you enjoy it. And this one, I need the crowd to join in with me. When I sing, there's a battle in Whitehall, you all join in going, whoa, ho, ho. So open your bags of potatoes, get the Sidona out, and join in with me. Thanks ever so much for having us. Represent, that's what I say. God bless you all, thanks. Hope you enjoy the song. You gotta chain yourself to the buses, show them what the fuss is, get us on the political map. They can try and talk us down, we'll let right into town. We won't take any more of your crap. Are you ready to sing? There's a battle in Whitehall, whoa, anger in our sights. There's a battle in Whitehall, whoa, fighting for our civil rights. civil disobedience, public are our audience. We ain't no freak show anymore. We're vocal and we're loud, disabled and we're proud. No sympathy but empathy, give to the cause. Are you ready to sing? There's a battle in Whitehall, anger in house. I can see, you know. There's a battle in Whitehall, fighting for our civil rights. Have you ever thought apartheid was wrong? Have you ever thought homophobia was wrong? Have you ever thought that sexism, racism, fascism was ever so wrong? So is this Lady Olga Maitland, who proves she's not on this land. Perhaps segregation ain't so bad after all, that's a joke. But John Smith, he has gone. Well, maybe this could be his song. As a battle cry for civil rights will never die. There's a battle in Whitehall, anger in our sights. There's a battle in Whitehall, fighting for our civil rights. And the thing is, you know what Selina was talking about, Barbara and Alan? If you squint very carefully at that programme, you might spot me in it. Thanks a lot for having us tonight. God bless. The album's out in the summer. Please support all disabled artists. Let's keep this going. Let me hear you singing. There's a battle in Whitehall, anger in our sights. There's a battle in Whitehall, we're fighting for our civil rights. Ha! Thank you. Let's have it.